7.2 Innate immune defenses. So the body generally defends you against anything that it does not recognize as being part of or belonging inside of you. The common targets of the defense system include pathogens. Pathogens are disease-causing bacteria, viruses, prions, protozoans, funguses, parasitic worms, really anything that can cause disease in the human body. So your defense system protects you against pathogens, but it also protects you against cancer cells. These are once normal body cells whose genetic changes cause unregulated cellular division. Immunity is just the killing or the removing of those foreign substances, pathogens, and cancer cells. And there are going to be two branches of our immune system, the innate and the adaptive branches. The innate immune system is going to be fully functional without any previous exposure to a pathogen, meaning that it's going to defend you against everyone and everything, regardless of whether or not it has any prior experience. Your adaptive branch of the immunity is only initiated when exposed to a pathogen. So meaning that once you're exposed to a pathogen, then your adaptive immunity comes into play and it starts fighting off very specifically. So our innate immune system is going to include a lot of interesting defenses. We're going to see a lot of physical and chemical barriers that are just going to prevent anything, good or bad, pathogen or otherwise. We're going to prevent anything from crossing from the external world into the internal world. So we'll see lots of physical and chemical barriers. We'll see the inflammatory response. The inflammatory response is an awesome thing. It's a very, very good natural part of the human body. It's how we protect ourselves. However, as we've said, it is a non-specific form of immunity, meaning that it does not differentiate between foreign bacteria or foreign bodies and our own cells. So the inflammatory response can have a very negative effect on the human body if allowed to go unchecked. And then there's also going to be the use of protective proteins, which we'll get into a little bit later. The innate defenses have no recognition of a pathogen, no memory. They are not responding because of necessarily exposure to a particular pathogen. They are just there all the time, defending and protecting our bodies. So like I said, this is going to be our very first strategy. It's our first line of defense against pathogens. The ultimate goal is to keep pathogens out. And we're going to do this through physical barriers, like skin. Skin is resistant to most toxins and enzymes of invading organisms. So it helps protect us just because of that physical barrier. We're also going to see mucous membranes. These are going to line the respiratory and digestive tracts, and they're going to help use that sticky mucus to trap microbes to prevent them from entering the body. We're also going to see chemical barriers. Chemical barriers like the sweat and oil glands of the skin produce chemicals that slow or prevent the growth of bacteria. The lining of your stomach produces hydrochloric acid and protein digesting enzymes that can destroy pathogens. Urine actually slows bacterial growth with acidity. It's a highly acidic environment, and it'll prevent and protect against the spread of infection. It also flushes microbes out of the urethra of just that physical presence of flushing. Saliva and tears contain lysozyme, which is an enzyme that kills bacteria. The acidic pH of the stomach inhibits or kills bacteria as well. Normal flora, so microbes that usually reside in the mouth and intestines, prevent potential pathogens from taking up residence there because they have to fight with the locals. Chronic use of antibiotics can actually make one susceptible to infection because it could kill off your own normal flora, your normal bacteria that you have, because most antibiotics do not differentiate between naturally occurring bacteria within the human body and foreign bacteria. The second step is the inflammatory response. This is our second line of defense against pathogens, and it's going to employ mainly neutrophils and macrophages to help engulf those pathogens. There are 4 symptoms of an inflammatory response that we typically think of: redness, heat, swelling, and pain. Chemicals like histamine are released by those damaged tissues and mast cells. This causes your capillaries to dilate and become more permeable, which ultimately leads to that redness, heat, swelling, and pain. Excess blood flow to that area causes the skin to redden and become warm. Increased temperature, and this is important. This is your body's intentional response. The reason we have that inflammatory response is because that increased temperature is meant to inhibit the growth of pathogens. That increased blood flow to the area brings more white blood cells to the area to help break down and fight against those pathogens. It also helps to flush some of those out of our system. So the inflammatory response is very, very intentional. The increased permeability of capillaries allows fluids and proteins to escape into those tissues. Blood clot could prevent blood loss. Excess fluid in the area, that swelling that we think of, that pressure, unfortunately presses on nerve endings, causing pain. So a lot of those sort of the redness, swelling, heat, pain, all of those are just a side effect of the inflammatory response, the end goal being to rush more blood cells to that area and fight off those pathogens. However, and that swelling also can immobilize the area, keep you from utilizing it and damaging it further. Those white blood cells, if you remember when we talked about those earlier, they'll actually leak out of the bloodstream into the surrounding tissue. The neutrophils are going to arrive there first. They're going to start to engulf and phagocytize debris, dead cells, bacteria, whatever foreign substance arrived that we do not want there. They can usually localize any infection and keep it from spreading. That's going to be our goal. We want to make sure that infection is neutralized as quickly as possible and does not enter the bloodstream if we can help it. If they die off in great quantities, they become sort of a yellowish white substance called pus. So if you've ever seen pus forming at the site of an infection, pus is usually a sign or a symptom of infection, and all that really is a mass of dead neutrophils, dead white blood cells that have done their job. If those neutrophils become overwhelmed, they can secrete cytokines. Those cytokines are going to attract even more neutrophils to that area, more white blood cells to the area. Monocytes that come to that area can become macrophages, which are going to, they're just powerful phagocytizers. They're going to just start engulfing those pathogens right, left, and center as quickly as they can. So that's our physical barriers, our inflammatory response, and then also our protective proteins. So our protective proteins, they work off of what is known as a complement system. This is where several plasma proteins designated by the letter C and a number, they're going to be involved in and amplify the inflammatory response. Some are going to bind to mast cells, triggering a histamine release. Others can attract phagocytes to the scene, but some can actually form a membrane attack complex. These little proteins are going to bind to the surface of the bacteria, and they're going to actually start poking little holes in the surface of bacteria. Fluid will then enter those cells, and they're going to burst. We're going to start to see a huge mass of fluid rush into those cells until they lysis and burst. Interferons are chemicals that are produced by cells that are infected with viruses as a warning to other cells. So even when your host cells are taken over by viruses, they can still send out a warning. They can send out sort of a silent alarm trigger to other cells in the area, say, hey, I'm infected, stay away. They can bind to the receptors of non-infected cells, causing them to produce substances that will interfere with viral replication, preventing that infected cell from spreading further. So you should be able to now list some of the examples of the body's innate defenses, describe the blood cells associated with the innate defenses, and detail how they function. I really want you to be familiar with the inflammatory response and what those 4 signs are and what causes those 4 signs of the inflammatory response. You should also be able to discuss the role of complement proteins in immunity as well.